Hello, everyone. I can't believe it is time for this, but you have just tuned in for the Countdown to Scream 2022 spoiler review. Joel.
I know.
How is this happening right now? How is this happening? But before we push everybody away who hasn't seen Scream yet, I already put out a review. Everyone here is dying to know what you think of the movie too. So before we lose everyone who isn't ready for spoilers, what are your non-spoiler thoughts on Scream?
I hated it. No, I'm joking. I absolutely loved Scream 2022. I think for fans, there was a lot of expectation, some trepidation, some fear, concerns going into this. This is such a beloved property for people like you and I. So, as the movie goes, don't fuck with the original. And that was a concern, I think. But for me, the real test of one of these films, and they've all passed it so far up until this point, was do I leave the theater wanting to see this film again and again and again, wanting to make moments and people from this film a part of my life for the foreseeable future, because I'm going to rewatch it. It's going to be part of that my existence, really. And I did leave giddy on a high with exactly that intention to go and see it again. I think there are some great performances. I think the incorporation of the legacy cast is smartly done. I think they set the path for the future really strongly. I think it's hilarious. I think it's perceptive about modern horror as well as its own existence. And I think it's got some really, really effective, memorable sequences that we will talk about, but that I will spoil here by just saying some of them are among my favorite in the franchise now. I think going forward, there are moments in this movie that I think are up there.
I will very much agree with that. All right. We're going to get into spoilers now. If anybody out there has not seen the movie, this is your cue to leave, but I have somewhere to send you if you want more Scream content that doesn't have any spoilers in it. We posted an interview with the wonderful Marley Shelton, who plays Judy Hicks. It is totally spoiler-free. Head on over to that video, go see the movie, and then come back to this, as it says in the title of the video, this spoiler review. This is a spoiler review of Scream 2022, Scream 5, whatever you're calling it right now. This is the time you need to leave if you don't want the movie spoiled for you. Okay?
Go away. Although if you're one of those, those breed of movie watchers who don't like horror films but like to read the wiki page and just get the spoilers, they can stay. You can stay. But if you actually want to watch this movie and not have it spoiled, get out. Be right back.
Yes. All right, this is it. The spoiler warning is in the trash. It's done. Now we can talk freely. So the way this is being organized is we're going to go character by character. And I felt like the list I sent you, Joel, starts with Jack Quaid's Richie Kirsch, because I'm going to say this out loud in a video now.
Spoiler, leave.
It's happening. It felt like it made the most sense to start with the killers, because the killers are going to influence everything else we talk about with the other characters.
100%. I think this is a really smart way of doing it because this movie is 99% spoilers. So just going character by character, starting with the killers, who are Richie and Amber.
With Richie,
yes,
I think Jack Quaid is incredible. So a lot of people keep asking me that have seen the movie, are you surprised? Were you surprised by the killers? And I can't say I'm surprised, but I don't necessarily think that has anything to do with the reveal in the movie not being shocking or good. I think it's more from the fact that we've sat here and we've theorized for months, and I've basically worked out scenarios in my mind where any of these individuals could be the killer. So no matter who it was, I think part of me was going to be I thought that was a possibility, because everyone was a damn possibility.
Exactly. And I think, I'll be honest, I wasn't surprised. If you had asked me going into this film who I think the killers were going to be, I might have actually picked these two. Had you asked me an hour into the movie who I thought it was going to be, I probably would have picked these two. Now, that's not to say...
confirm. I want to give you credit for this. We can confirm that you were suspicious of Amber. You said it.
Very suspicious.
And I was like, no, but you nailed this moment.
Yes, and it plays out as exactly as I suspected in the film. So I think that's one thing to consider is Perri and I and people who are watching this video speak a certain language. We consume media in a certain way. And obviously, we spent time dissecting the promotional material sent out for this in a way that others don't. So I think while this reveal was not necessarily surprising to us, and I'll tell you why in a second, I think for the audience, it will be a real big surprise and real payoff. I think for me, a couple of things that going into it, I just felt, why cast Jack Quaid in a Scream movie if you're not going to have him be the killer and do the killer reveal speech and be quirky and all that kind of stuff at the end? That was just, for me, the vibe. And then, yeah, the Amber thing was, sorry, we're going to be talking about Richie now, but we'll get to Amber in a second. But well, I guess, what I had said by seeing some of the promotional materials where she was screaming on the porch or the balcony. And I just said, no, that is misdirection. That is a fake scream. And I think it was Gale, trap, or Sidney. One of them just says trap. And I saw that in the trailer and I was like, that is definitely a trap. That said, I was really interested in the motivations. I did not see that coming.
I will agree with you on all of that, except I cannot say that I guessed that she was faking it on the porch. I tried to convince everyone of the opposite, but I'm a big fan of this reveal, obviously because of the motivation behind it, but also because the two of them are so good in the role. I should probably say at this point, I have seen the movie twice, so I always really like when there's a big killer reveal, going back and watching how the two characters behave throughout. And I think that they did the best possible job they could of hiding it through their performance, but also hiding little nuances in their performance that when you go back and revisit it, certain things that they do pop in a really fun way. And, it adds an extra layer to playing along with the reveal in this movie. They have a couple of back and forths where there's like a level of chemistry and understanding where, and like she calls him babe a million times in that finale. They clearly had, an established relationship more so than just like, we met on Reddit and now we're doing this. So there's something there. And I think you could really feel it strongly in the second watch in particular. But Jack Quaid I knew was good. I had only seen Mikey in some of why is the show's
Better
name?
Things.
Better Things. Because I haven't watched all of Better Things, but I've only seen some of her work in that, so I'm not fully aware of how great her range is. Like, she's real damn good at doing that villain turn along the lines of, I think Matthew Lillard as Stu is kind of untouchable in the third act, but like she gets pretty damn close. I really enjoyed her just watching her just like go for it in the end.
Yeah, I need to. So unlike Perri, I've only seen it once. I'm going to my second screening tomorrow night because I want to see it on opening night with an opening night crowd who's actually schlepped out to do it. And I'm sure you'll be there probably this weekend again. So I haven't really had the chance to reflect on the performance, particularly as it relates to the pre-reveal. My one thing about her was that I just wish we had had a little more time with her prior to the finale and the climax. Like, we don't get a bunch of time with her from memory. But I think Mikey Madison is incredible. I love Better Things. I think her performance is really strong. I think the one thing about the reveal this time is that it felt to happen quite quickly, the turn. They're like, if I'm remembering correctly, when they're all sort of standing in a circle and then she just pulls out the gun and shoots and says, welcome to the final act. As opposed to, I feel like with the previous films, there is a little bit more of a grandiosity to reveal, and I kind of liked that in some ways. I can't comment on the performance too much because I need to go and revisit it. But I did leave the movie thinking, reveal wise, I always go Scream 1, Scream 4, just because I think Emma Roberts is like phenomenal in that sequence. Scream 2, and then I think this is definitely better than Roman.
Everything's better than Roman. I have to show you my Nev interview. I mean, I'll link to it at the end of this video, but
Who's Roman?
Well, because I told you this specifically. I asked her how the reveal of the killer in Scream 3 influenced her performance in 4 and 5, and her answer was something along the lines of like, who's the killer in Scream 3? And it's like, I mean, it is kind of the right answer. because
Yeah, I know.
it turns like the whole character and the franchise on its head in a way that I don't think was probably the best approach.
One thing I will say about Richie, yeah, I think they're very good in their roles. I think, and I love what they did with his character as this kind of, I guess, constant misdirect both to Samantha and to us about him being a novice in the franchise and having never
Mhm.
watched these films, and reliving them through Netflix, and then engaging with people on YouTube commenting
Mm.
about this. I thought that was a really clever tool, and it felt very organic to the way that someone would. Um, well, had he been really doing it, I think it would have been quite an organic experience, and I thought that was a level of fun I quite enjoyed with the film.
Yeah, I just enjoyed the little nods to past films, the most obvious thing being him being the boyfriend and being the killer, getting
Hmm.
slashed on the arm like Derek. I thought that was a nice little way to give a nod to Scream
Yes.
2. And, even though I definitely had the feeling that he could be the killer, there's a good deal of sincerity to Richie's relationship with Sam that I think was powerful enough
Mm.
to kind of push you in another direction and not make it so super obvious that it's him. But it's like
Hmm.
what really seals the deal here is the motivation, and when it comes to, the amount of screen time Mikey gets, this is something that I was really paying attention to on the second watch because I think what tends to happen when you're, like, so hyped and so excited for a film and then you finally get to see it is that it's just like, it's a lot. It's a lot to
Yeah.
soak in on one viewing, and it's difficult to, like, parse everything out and have a clear understanding of if you got enough of everything. So how much I got of each of these characters was something that was, like, on the top of my mind, and there's a good deal. There's a good deal of Amber in this movie, and
Hmm.
there's a bunch of things that happen early on that I think signal malicious intentions, and they do it very I don't even wanna say subtly because she snaps at Sam
She
quite
hates
a
Sam. Yeah.
she really hates Sam, but like not that that was like a red flag as much to me on the first viewing, but on the second viewing, I got like those violent undertones to it. And
Mm.
it made me appreciate the nuance in her work that I wasn't able to access the first time around. And it just made me more impressed.
Yeah, no, and on the motivations, I thought it was really interesting. You talk about throwbacks. I think what the franchise has done really well, um, Roman notwithstanding, uh, is um, is to the motivations super well fit with the time, right?
Mhm.
That these films are being released, and are very much as good horror is a reflection of the times, and particularly what's happening in celebrity and pop culture. And I think that was, sometimes some people would say that they're overstated, a little unsubtly hit, and particularly in this one. But I'm like, go back and watch the others because they
Yeah.
they are just as unsubtle on that. But I felt this motivation about retaking the franchise, pushing it forward, um, the fans being upset by where the series had gone was super interesting, and I felt that the connection that those two had and the fact that they found each other was a really lovely throwback to Debbie Salt
Mm.
and my friend. And it just felt like such a Scream 2 kind of vibe to me, which I'm always about. So I particularly enjoyed that, and I have gripes with people who complain that this twist and this some of the language in this finale was a little
Yeah.
unsubtle and on the nose.
I feel like a lot of people watching this channel know this about me, but I always try to steer clear of ever sounding like defensive or dismissive of someone else's opinion. Like if you don't like
Mm,
Scream, fine, that's your opinion, and I don't want to make anything come across like I think you're wrong because I have a different feeling about it. But I've had a bunch of conversations about all the meta stuff was really good, but in the third act, it was too on the nose and they were too intense about it. But that intensity was literally running through the veins of their motive and those characters and who
mhm.
they were. And it's like I think about that a lot with the reveal of Amber being the killer. Like she's basically spent all this time, you know, ready to burst with her enthusiasm for the fact that she lives in Stu's house and they've hatched this plan and they're gonna have their big third act. Like, it made so much sense to me that the two of them would go so over the top with it. And yes, the previous installments are quite over the top in terms of their references to the horror genre and the things that they're trying to get at within it. It is extreme here, but I think it's justifiably extreme given who these people are.
And who they worship, and the film franchise that they're obsessed with, right? It's they're play acting their favorite thing, and wanting to go bigger. So it does make complete sense that they would go in that direction. I'm not as graceful, as full of grace as you are, Perri. If you disagree with us, you're wrong. Go back to school.
Oh, I can't.
I have not been able to eat these criticisms today that, oh, this film is just so meta, it's eating itself. It's getting too meta. I'm like,
it's literally the point
a Scream
of
franchise.
Yeah.
Like,
The other thing that I have been fighting the urge to kind of I guess like snap back at in a sense is anybody who's saying like it's good, but it's not as good as the original. Part of the reason why this movie worked, like I'll tell you, I'm not going to rank it above the original. I am one of the people this movie is talking about in terms of a fan of the 1996 original whose life was like completely molded in a number of respects by falling in love with that movie. Nothing will top that for me. But this movie it features a story that flat out recognizes that it can't compete with the original.
Yeah.
So it's respecting it, but doing its own thing. So I feel like anyone who runs with that headline, like it's good, but not as good as the original, is kind of missing the point of the whole thing.
I agree. I also feel like that is, I won't say lazy because I do have a bit of grace, and I was the former editor-in-chief of a website that absolutely celebrates film criticism, and I think that everyone, obviously entitled, etc. But I think in reviewing sequels in general, that is a kind of fallback. Easy argument or easy direction to go in potentially. I will say this, I don't know if this is a final word on these two, but we had joked, I believe, about us being the killers at some point. In a very meta way, we kind of were. I would say that. Or stand-ins for us. It's not, I mean, I'm definitely not a toxic fan, but definitely the idea of people who are obsessed with this franchise and whose lives have been involved, I think I was thinking about it, Perri.
I was thinking about it, and I thought about it heavily when I wrote my first reaction tweet. Because at first I had just flat out had the sentence, it feels like this movie is talking to me. But then I had to add, like, I either wrote in a sense or to a degree, because I definitely do not cross over into any toxicity in terms of expressing my fandom. But, when Jasmine Savoy Brown gives that speech.
Pinned back on the back, I was like, she's talking to me.
Yeah, no, it was like, is she looking at me right? Like, does she see me sitting here?
And the fascinating thing is that the people behind this film were also getting spoken to. So they were, as passionate as we are. So do we need to move on? Oh, we're not going to get through this. This will be a 4-hour.
Well, we kicked it off with some of the more interesting characters of the bunch, given what
and then we get
to this entire movie.
I see who's next on your list, and I'm like, do we even need to?
Yeah, then we get to Vince, Kyle Gallner. I'm a very big fan of Kyle's. If you haven't seen Dinner in America, go find it. He's also in a whole bunch of other things, but I just bring that up because not enough people have seen that movie. He plays Vince, and I participated in that virtual set visit last year, and so I kind of just assumed that everyone involved would have, like a bit of a substantial role, and he gets very, very limited screen time. Like he feels a little to me like the Sarah Michelle Gellar of this movie, where he is sacrificed because of how it ties into the string of killings that needs to happen, where, like she shares a name with a previous killed person, and he is related to Stu. So he had to go next. I definitely wanted to see more of him because I am a fan, but I understand why they had to do that with the character. And ultimately, I really liked that kill scene. I am convinced, and I'm going to ask the filmmakers about this if I'm allowed to talk spoilers with them at any point. Fingers crossed. I feel like you can tell who kills who in this movie by their approach to the kill. Like I feel like Amber is like very stab happy. Like whenever they go stab, 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 like
Yeah.
it's probably her. Whereas something like the Vince killing, where it was out of nowhere and it was just like one shot through in the cheek and that was it.
And the
Like I
Wes.
feel, yeah,
Yeah.
and I feel like that was probably Richie.
That is a very interesting observation. Again, I've only seen this once, so I haven't had the chance to go back and sort of maybe reassess my opinion. If I was in the editing room, I think this character could go. Even though I enjoyed the kill for what it was, I just sort of went. I mean, I also think the next character could go potentially as well. But
I have different opinions on that now.
yeah, okay, that's interesting. No, I felt it did feel superfluous. I know that they had to have Stu, but it was also then kind of just thrown in some conversation later, right? That almost felt like an add-on.
It was a very, very quick in and out line of
Yes.
dialogue that he is the son of Stu's sister, making him Stu's nephew.
Right. So not exactly essential to this story having, taking place. I feel like maybe the filmmakers, again, love this film, like this kill scene, had a vision of what they wanted, a sort of car park scene with a cool car, and they wanted to play the Nick Cave song, and so they were like, let's make a bad boy.
I like that they included that song. It made me happy. I've also become convinced that there was more of him that got cut out of the movie.
Oh, there must have been.
I think
there must have been.
so. There,
because also she waits there, doesn't she?
So
what happened there?
This is gonna tie into what we were gonna talk about next, because the next character on this list is Liv, played by Sonia Amar. So the scene where they're all kind of on the picnic tables and they're talking, and Vince pulls up and they're like, well, she was sleeping with him. They all get up and they go to the hospital to see Tara, and Liv is left there, and it ends, I think, on a shot of her looking at Vince. I think they went off together and shot a scene, and we just don't have that scene in the final cut, and it might have beefed up both roles a little more than what we wind up
because it sort of it was never circled back on, I don't think, and it was a very deliberate filmmaking choice to make us suspicious. And I guess the assumption was she went off and but then I didn't see how that worked, like, because it never circled back. She was never particularly aggrieved. I don't know, it just sort of things happen, right?
This might be wishful thinking. This is gonna like really spell out my outlook on the world and perhaps how naive I am, but given what Liv wants later in the movie from Chad, like it seems like, obviously she wants to have sex, but like she's really like full force into this relationship. I think that shit between Liv and Vince never ended, and that the scene that got cut out is the two of them basically being like Vince trying to push her and her saying like, nope, that's it, I am committed. And that pushes her down the path of, wanting to have that stronger relationship with Chad.
Sure. I'm like, but just cold, blunt thing, like, I'm going to take my fanboy out for a second and be like, would that, like, does any part of you think you needed that scene, or you needed more of Liv or more of Vince in this film?
I wouldn't mind another scene of Liv, but now that we've hit Liv, one of the complaints that I referenced in my non-spoiler review is that one character doesn't get enough screen time to make an impression, and it was her that I was referring to. On second watch, other than the Vince stuff at the very beginning where it does feel like a scene is missing to me, I think she does exactly what she needs to do. I think her performance is enough to draw you into what that character is going through. It gives enough of a foundation to the Liv and Chad relationship, where when bad things happen to them, you care, you understand his motivation to go outside and reconnect with her. I think it works.
Yeah, I need to watch it again. I'll say that. That's
Very
all I'll say about
understandable
Liv.
with
Like,
this.
because I feel like she had certain outbursts and situations and conversations where I was just like, who and what is this character? Especially, I believe it was the exchange between her. And I know that her and Mindy are not on the best
Yeah.
of terms, but that was kind of strange. Does that play better the second time around, or more
It did play better.
comprehensible?
It's a big leap, you know? They
Yeah.
literally point a finger at Liv as being the least likely to be the killer because she's the most boring of the bunch, and then all of a sudden she's giving this really, like, vicious, nasty speech and,
Mm.
you know, suggesting that she could kill people, but,
Yeah.
like,
It's an odd turn for her. So I just
it felt like to me on again, on rewatch that you know, after being you know, pushed by her friends throughout the entire film, that was the moment where, like, she snapped and that's how it came out.
yeah. I guess, as I said, if we'll get into the gripes, but my
Yes.
gripes are essentially that I didn't find those two characters particularly compelling.
Fair enough. They are the ones with the least amount of screen time, the least amount of layers of the bunch. I get it. All right. I guess we can kind of group Chad and Mindy together.
The Meeks
The Meeks Martin
Martins
twins.
with
Man, I love them. I love them
oh,
so much. I'm so glad they're both alive.
me too. That's one thing I will say about this film. Love that they left legacy. They left new cast members alive to carry it through, and not just the final girl.
Yes.
I need to watch this again. This is a terrible way to be a YouTuber. I haven't seen this enough. No, I think my impression of Chad, and I love Mason Gooding Jr. I think everything I've seen him in, I think he does leave an impression. He's got like a really good screen presence. He's handsome as all hell. But I loved that they gave him layers beyond the typical jock. That he was a bit more sensitive, a bit more humorous. That he was a little more insecure, and I loved, even though they didn't sort of hammer it, there was a really natural sort of sense of connection and siblingness, I feel, between him and Jasmine Savoy Brown.
Mhm. He's great. I think they're both examples of actors who take what's on the page and make it their own. Another reason why I wound up liking Liv a lot more the second time around is because I really dug that conversation the two of them have when she tells him that she wants to have sex, and he's like,
Mm.
"No, no, because you could be the killer." That is a very difficult batch of dialogue to pull off and make work, and he does it, and there's also, like, one instance after the next where Jasmine Savoy Brown does the same thing. We've already kind of touched on the speech in the Meeks Martin house where she basically, like, says our lives to our face, and
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just exceptional work because I also think that speech and a lot of this movie for that matter very easily could have teetered into like criticism of horror and this particular franchise to the point of being dismissive or making you feel
Mm.
bad for being such a big fan, but they managed to address toxicity in fandom without actually doing that to folks who are not toxic. And in that
Right.
moment, I think a lot of that comes through her ability to nail the tone of a speech like that.
Absolutely. I think there's no doubt that Jasmine Savoy Brown is among, for me, a handful of MVPs in this film. She stands out. She sells everything. I do think, as you say, what's on paper could come out. I mean, I think what's on paper also balances that line. I do think there are a couple of instances in this film where people kind of unprompted from the natural situation get up and speechify or start to speechify a little bit. I think
Mhm.
Dewey has to do this to an extent
Mhm.
in early conversations where it's a jump to dialogue we need to get to that doesn't perhaps naturally flow. I do, you may push back on that a bit, but I do think part of the thing is that they are sold so well, and we'll get to David and how great he is as Dewey in
Yes.
this particular film. But I think she really nails that doesn't feel as uncomfortable as it could have, or as sudden as it could
Mhm.
have. And I mean, I just love the line at the end where she's like sitting on the couch and she's going, "I'm going to smoke weed and maybe make out with her." And I'm
Yeah.
just like, you have such charisma to burn. My one not gripe again. It may reveal itself to be less gripey when I see the film a second time. Is that she does kind of disappear in the climax after sort of being injured or tossed to the side, but clearly is going to get up again. I was wondering whether she was going to play a part when it came to sort of the final shooting of the killer and all that kind of stuff, was that she was going to reemerge. And I was kind of hoping for it because I do love her so much and I wanted her to have a bigger moment in that regard.
I think her disappearance, like, you know, I always want more of her in everything I see her in. So obviously I wouldn't have minded if she played a bigger role in the third act bloodbath, but there was like a real messiness to Richie and Amber's agenda where like they knew what they wanted, but they couldn't quite pull it off. And I think they get lost in the chaos. And that made sense to me as like the two killers in the story. So it's like even the idea of Chad being alive, like Chad shouldn't be alive. They should have finished him off right then and there. But it's the shock of seeing the car pull up and then you got to run off. It's like there's all this chaos happening. So when stuff like that winds up happening, I make an excuse for it because it just like it feels right and it feels kind of human to me.
Right, they are the most incompetent killers we've seen in this franchise, right? Like they can't even get the opening right. Police are always coming and saving the day. Although I will say this is a very robust group of young people who can withstand quite the amount of stabbings and survive.
Well, there's a lot of stabbings.
There's a lot of stabbing. What did you think of the very on the nose, and I don't say that in a negative or
I knew you were going
way,
here.
the couch scene.
I thought it was great.
Yeah, okay.
I thought it was great. I flat out bring this up in my non-spoiler review. There's a scene that on paper, if I had read it in the script, I would have been like, throw this in the trash. Like this is too much. You're taking a step too far. I think she plays it exceptionally well, and I think it very, very well reflects a quality in horror movies that I love so much, which is when something like seemingly normal, like you're sitting on a couch watching a horror movie happens and it like triggers a memory from a horror movie that makes you do something that's somewhat out of the ordinary. Do you know how many times I've sat on a couch and watched a horror movie and thought about that moment and screamed and just like turned and looked over my shoulder for a hot second? That's what that moment felt like to me. And also when the recreation of the Randy scene ends and she learns from it, that beat hits especially hard and makes that moment well worth it.
100%. I really like that beat. I love that sequence. I think what also makes it work is that, you know, I think some of the criticism of 4 and maybe 3 is that these people don't feel like real people and they're not, you know, it's kind of like, would you really have a Stabathon blood fest in Woodsboro during this scenario? And do these people actually have hearts, etc.? Her watching that movie and her obsession with that franchise is actually beautifully written because it's an homage to her uncle, who she loves. And so her watching that scene, it's not about him getting killed, it's about him, in this particular film, surviving. But I found that connection really quite beautifully played. One thing I did just remember to touch on is when you talked about the way that she delivers that monologue about fandom and toxicity, etc., and how this film really does teeter on the line. I've drawn comparisons on Twitter. You can follow me on Twitter if you want to, and others have as well, between this film and what it's doing and what the Matrix Resurrections did this year. And I think they share some DNA. Like if Scream 5 had babies with Wes Craven's New Nightmare, via, I don't know, The Matrix Reloaded, you would get The Matrix Resurrections. And I think that film, which I actually really loved and loved a lot more than most people, because it's kind of like such an anti-movie and so bold in its ways, that film probably does teeter on the I'm going to kick the fans in the face a lot more than this one does. This film is the kind of loving embrace, maybe trying to have it both ways, as I've seen some criticisms, but it's an interesting study and an approach to fandom and toxicity and retaking the narrative, and how you can do it softly and still deliver the thrills, and how you can do it with, I think, a harsher way and sort of really like refuse to give the fans what they want.
Mm-hmm. I think you absolutely nailed it. I mean, overall, this thing just feels like one big loving celebration of Scream and Scream fandom. And I mean, I like that might be the quality I wanted most in this movie. So I was quite happy with that. Oh wait, one other Jasmine scene that I loved and thought she was really good in alongside Mikey, that conversation in the basement. What an
Oh yeah.
what a brilliant back and forth. And what a brilliant back and forth that I hate to keep saying this when you keep saying I need to see it again, but when you watch it again, knowing that Amber's the killer, like it makes it fun in a whole new way. Is a very good moment that I could have watched like another 20 minutes of.
Just the movie stops for 20 minutes. It's just them exchanging lines.
I'm fine with that.
Should we go to our special
This
guest?
one makes me sad. So
sad.
I guess we just group Wes and Judy Hicks together.
Mm-hmm.
It's so mean. It was so
R.I.P.
mean. Jeez.
It's so mean.
She's
But
such
how
a
mean
ray
is
of light.
Ghostface is so mean in this. He's so mean. Like, I mean, I know Ghostface is always mean because Ghostface is going around killing people with knives. But this kind of like, it's back to Ghostface who tricked Casey Becker, right? It's kind of like, he likes to be mean. And this is so, like, he's in the hospital and here, he's like the Joker.
I think I said this to you on the phone, but like, you know how because obviously you were the first person that I needed to speak to immediately after walking out of the theater on first viewing.
We spoke that night for quite a while, I think.
We did. So, you know how in the past films we're always like garage door, or like we refer to the location, the weapon, like the big thing that happens. Part of the reason why these kills feel meaner to me is because they feel more fueled by going after like an important relationship to somebody, or like a weakness maybe, or a vulnerability. And I think that's why this killing hurts quite a bit. And you know, we don't get all that much screen time with Marley Shelton and Dylan Minnette sharing the screen together. It is a lengthy sequence compared to some of the others, but you're basically talking about the two of them talking about each other in other scenes. And I think Sharon, like, really only conversing in that one scene alone leading up to their deaths. But in that moment, you get a full understanding of their dynamic as mother and son. You get a little bit of a sense of their history, given how she's rubbed off on him. And now he's got like the taser and the tape on his phone and all that stuff. And when she dies, like, I was distraught over what that was going to do to him.
I was first of all, I was shocked. Like, you know, these films don't. I mean, it's very hard to surprise me watching a film like this these days. In terms of, you know, I wouldn't have been. I was expecting perhaps Judy Hicks to die, maybe. I was expecting anyone to die, but the fact that she died in that moment and that it was such a misdirect, I literally was like, "Wow, oh my god, this film, all bets are off." I loved.
It's scarier when it's in broad daylight.
That's the thing about the Randy killer #2, right? It's like your treasured person killed in broad daylight, completely brutally. It's terrifying because you think there's no way that's going to happen there. It doesn't even enter your mind. You're like, you know, you start to get the sense of dread. Oh, she's going in the house and something's going to happen to her in the house. But just the fact that it's done like that, she plays it so well. I feel like for the limited amount of screen time we get with her, it's as Marley said in our interview, we quickly flesh out a world around Deputy or Sheriff Judy that we hadn't seen before. Her home life, her sense of family, her character, her personality. I mean, I loved her on the phone call in the car. We mentioned it in the interview, but just I prefer animated films and children's and musicals. Just so cute. The sushi, I just love those little details. And they, like I think the Meeks Martins have an instant rapport. The Hickses have an instant familial connection. So I was devastated. I do like, of course, the way that they sort of inverted them. I'm getting very film school here, but how they inverted the male gaze for the shower scene with Wes.
When he died, it was just like I was already really raw from being upset that I
Mm.
knew his mother had just died. But then on top of that, you know, obviously with the closing of the doors, they really take their time. But then when he actually has his ghost faced encounter, it's like it takes so long for the knife to actually go
Ah,
in that you have all this time to think in your own head, like, Wes, please fight back. And then it
mm.
doesn't happen. And then they linger on it even longer and it hurts even more. But it's the thing about Wes's and Judy too, for that matter. But I'm just talking about the new cast members here. Another thing that really speaks to how damn good Dylan Minnette is he doesn't just establish a rapport and a real connection with his mother in this movie. He does it with that entire group of friends where
Mm.
you very quickly see and feel and understand Wes's value to them and why he functions as like kind of the heart of that group. So to
Yeah.
see the heart of that group get extinguished in the middle of the movie is basically saying like we're not playing around. This is gonna hurt. And
There
I
are
felt the
stakes.
hurt.
And I think it really goes back to what they talk about at the end when they're talking about the how to do a recall, right? It's like there has to be stakes. And I
Yeah.
think this film, obviously, we'll get to the big one, but um, yeah, and it was sort of I'm of two minds in a way because I enjoyed him and he's so charismatic and he's a character that is defined instantly almost.
Yeah.
Like you're like, oh, I get this guy. I enjoy spending time with him. I want to see how ludicrous his sort of security obsession becomes and how this will escalate throughout the film. And I'm of two minds in the sense that I was like, damn, I wanted more of him, but I love the fact that he did it because it was so surprising. I also felt that for a period during that sequence with the doors and stuff, I was like, oh, this is just going to be the moment he finds her dead and he's going to be fine and move on, but it's going to be very
Mhm.
devastating for him. But then it sort of got to that point where this is going too long. I'm like, oh no, he's fucking dying.
Uh,
And I was like, oh, this is awful.
Yeah. It gives you the chance to think about just about everything.
Yeah. And I will say just overall in this sequence, this was one of the ones that I'm like, this sequence is one of the best in the franchise.
That's an all-timer for me too.
Yeah. And I think it is because I just loved that they took the time and the patience and built it. Um, yeah, I think the sequence is better than probably anything in 4 or 3 potentially for me.
Hmm. Wow. Well, I don't know. The only one I'm getting hung up on is the mirrors. But you might be right.
Hmm.
I really like that scene.
We know.
I know. Let's move on to someone I'm very excited to finally get to talk about in full. Jenna Ortega. I
Ah,
love that this really was the opening scene of the movie, but that she didn't die. She's too good to kill off in the opening scene. Like, I know they did that with Drew Barrymore, who's also wildly talented, but I did not want this franchise to go forward without Jenna Ortega. I am a very big believer that she is one of the absolute best of her generation. Everything that I've ever seen her in is like, just like peak work, making everything around her better. But I'm just going to keep saying this, even though I said it in my non spoiler review. Please do not miss her in The Fallout. It comes out on HBO Max later this month. And like, that's Joel, that is the type of performance that makes me go, like, that one could win an Oscar one day.
oh,
It's
I
that
mean,
it's that good.
she is so phenomenal in this. I mean, you could tell from the trailer that she was good
Yeah.
and that she was like convinced and that this was a different tone. There is genuine terror in this opening sequence. So I suppose we can talk about her performance and the opening sequence then. But I think somewhat. I think she's so good almost that some of the others don't fare as well
I knew you were going to go
by
there.
virtue of being in her orbit. You know what I mean? Like she's kind of
Mhm.
like sucking. It's hard to, and we'll get to Barrera in a second, who I think is overall quite strong, but I do think Ortega is so good that you kind of watch, and I certainly did. I felt when Wes Hicks died, I felt, well, they could kill Samantha, and this movie becomes Jenna Ortega's movie, and I was like, and I don't mind it because if Jenna Ortega is our final girl, the new Sidney Prescott, I'm like, I'm down because it just funny funny. I didn't expect it to get funny after the opening. Just poignant, a beautiful connection with actually with Barrera, which I really like. The sisterly thing was great.
I get very, very sensitive about sister relationships because I have a sister that I'm
Mm,
quite close to, and that's something that this franchise never had. So to see something like that so well represented on screen, it really got to me. It's like I'm thinking about the moment where Sam arrives at the hospital and like
mm.
they share a look and like
You
you could
came.
see Jenna Ortega's eyes well up and like my eyes welled up. I was very sensitive to that. And then, also seeing how their sister relationship gets stronger and stronger throughout it. It makes the
Mm,
end payoff when they get into the ambulance and she basically says something to the effect of like, nope, like I'm never gonna leave you now. Like
yeah.
it really meant something. So I think that their chemistry was one of the highlights of the film. But I understand what you had said before very much.
Yeah, look, I think the chemistry works, and um, it's not an unfortunate thing. It's kind of a gift to the movie that you have a performer who's this charismatic and this talented and this much of just an on-screen presence. So I think in the early going, when we'll talk about Melissa Barrera in a second, I think she's given some heavy lifting to do dialogue-wise, um,
Very.
which is, it's like here's the backstory related to Billy Loomis. I went upstairs, his man, all this kind of stuff. I'm like, oh, that's really hard to do and emote. And Jenna is in a different boat, so I will give her that. I will say this opening scene I adore.
Mhm.
I think it's easily the third best
Yeah,
opening
I
scene.
know.
Um, and I felt it did what. So Scream 4's opening scene was so clever and meta and all this kind of stuff. But this film had all that meta, um, actually doing it even more interestingly, but still managed to feel real and lived
Mhm.
in and genuinely scary and stakes. It also positioned the entire film and sort of said where we were and what the mentality is and what the commentary we're going to see is. It told us what had happened with Stab. I just, I adored it. The fact that she's on the phone Googling to IMDb Heather Graham, I was like, this shit's amazing.
She is almost too good in that opening. My heart broke into a million pieces as that sequence continued on, and then the same thing happened in that hospital scene. My After all that, and I mean, how scary is something like that? Like, she is totally injured. She gets in the damn wheelchair, she rolls away, and then her phone rings, and like she's up against a killer with a damn knife, but I'm stressed about her not being able to reach her phone in that moment, and like she makes you feel that pain every
Oh my
time her
God.
hand touches the wheelchair. It's
Mm.
just like that is uh like sky high, like peak physical performance where you could write all the stage direction you want. It's Jenna Ortega that makes you feel
Oh,
the pain that Tara's experiencing. And yet again, after that opening sequence, it is so wildly effective and it absolutely ripped my heart to pieces.
agreed. I think. Do we want to talk about the hospital sequence, or do we wait till we talk about?
Well, sure shit about it.
Well, let's talk about the sister. We've spoken about the
Okay.
sisters, right? So, um, as I said, I think that I thought the character of Samantha Carpenter is a really interesting concept. I love the fact that it was connected to Billy Loomis.
Yes.
I enjoyed all of that, and I think she's a really compelling final girl. I think, as I said, I think there's a lot that they have to get out in the first third about of this movie. Some of it plays a little less naturally at times than others. I think there is a hospital scene with them that is on the one level great about establishing them as siblings and beautiful relationship, but there is a sort of spiel that Samantha has to give that I think is hard. I think it's really
Mhm.
hard.
It
But
is.
I will say, by the end, I'm on board, and I want to go all the way with her because she, in that final sequence,
Oh my
steps
god,
up and
yeah.
is the badass final girl we need.
You know
What
what?
did you think?
I I definitely had a similar feeling. Again, I hate to keep bringing this up, but your thoughts evolve when you see movies multiple times. On
Stop
second
bragging.
on second viewing, I don't see any other way around it. It's like some of the
Mm,
conversations that I've had since say, maybe they pushed it too far. Like you didn't need to include XYZ detail in that particular, monologue. Like I kind of think you need it. It otherwise wouldn't make sense, or it wouldn't make you feel the amount of pressure she's under and the struggle that she's dealing with. So I think I needed all that information. It's just very challenging to deliver all of that in one big chunk.
yeah, and I think the movie, for what the movie has to achieve, it needs to get that out. Like they've got to lay the chips. They've got to start bringing the legacy. They've got to start. They've got to deliver set pieces. There's so much going on.
That's But that's also like another thing in this movie that I feel like if I had read it on the page, I might have said to the filmmakers, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, that's not good."
mm,
Like this idea of a girl finding a diary and discovering she's Billy Loomis's daughter. It's like even when I say that, I'm like, that sounds silly, but I mean, actually, now that I'm saying it this way, really, it's convincing to me because of Barrera's performance. Again, it's a lot and it's a different quality than, let's say, what Jenna Ortega had just been doing or does after. But like in that speech, she made me picture it. I pictured young Sam go up to the attic, find the diaries. I pictured that moment where she yells at her mom and her dad's behind her. I guess that is a sign of an effective monologue delivery.
yeah, sure. I'll say again. Uh, that is, again, I think it's less her. My issues with that thing are less about her necessarily
Mhm.
than it is about the clunkiness of some of that dialogue, which again has to be there, but it also I think doesn't allow her to get off on the right foot in some ways,
Mm.
especially after we've had Jenna. But as I said, I do believe that she really steps up, and I like it when they sort of go on the investigation route or the we need help route. Um, how did you feel about the hostility towards Sidney and Gale, or at least the sort of coldness there?
It makes sense. We're talking about someone who found out she was related to the killer and just like because of what happened, she ruined her family, feels responsible for ruining her family, and felt badly enough and scared enough of her own roots to like pick up and leave. It's like even though what she was going through at that point might have signaled that she needs to work with them, like that's
Mm,
not necessarily the type of trauma and past you can just like cut off and say like let's just work together now. It felt right to me that she would
right.
push back against them.
Yeah, no, I agree. I felt that made a lot of sense, and I quite liked the surprising, somewhat from a narrative perspective, if not from a character actually making the right decision,
Mhm.
choice to just get out of Dodge.
Yes.
Like I was like, yeah, do that. Like that's what I would do probably.
Yeah. I gotta ask you the big question.
Mhm.
What did you think of the return of Billy?
I was surprised.
Me too, me too. I think that might have been one
um,
of the biggest surprises of the entire movie. I don't think I
oh yeah,
ever in a million years would have guessed they had done that.
no, I definitely I was like, wow. Um, I'm interested to see what you thought about it on second viewing because I think
Yes.
there's no getting around the fact that it's a little hokey, and I think somewhat, and then I think about how the general audience is going to react, and I think some people will giggle, and
Mhm.
I think others will embrace it. Um, and I don't know that that idea of her having a hidden darkness is fully explored to the depth that I
Yes.
think they needed to make that justifiable or work. That said, I'm
I got
always
a
happy to see Skeet Ulrich. I thought the
yes.
de-aging was quite good, and I'm not mad about it. And I may learn to love it like I learned to love Sidney. You know?
I wasn't mad about it after first viewing, but that was probably the biggest issue that I pinpointed, and I'm like, "I don't know if that really works," but I wasn't mad
Mm,
about it. Then I watched it again, and it goes back to what I said earlier. It's one of those things where, like, you're so overwhelmed with finally seeing this movie that when you get to go in a second time and know it's coming, you might be a little more open to absorbing something like that and really,
Mm.
appreciating some of the layers that come with it. And I think I was in that situation. And that's one of those things where I do have to applaud Barrera's work, because like yet another major acting challenge that no one in
Yes.
this movie has to deal with but her. And she handles it quite well. And I think it makes sense, again, given that character's history. Like, not only is she hating herself because she ruined her family, but she's also terrified that something like the qualities in Billy could be hereditary, and she might have this inner rage and demon that she won't be able to control at a point. So I thought that
That's what I love.
it made sense. Like, it made
The
sense that in a way he'd be haunting her.
the setup, I like what it establishes for the future. I will say that. In terms of if she's our final girl moving forward, the fact
Yes.
that that's inside her, I think is complex and interesting, and could take the franchise in interesting directions. Not that she's going to be the killer or anything like that, but I
Yeah.
do think it adds layers to what she's going to be experiencing and the lens through which she does that.
I am of two minds with what you just said. On the one hand, I very much agree. I think it's going to be really interesting if that last look she had with him in the mirror,
Mm.
where he got her to the knife and she went like real stab happy on Richie.
Oh yeah.
Did that moment unleash the inner Billy in her? Like, it's very, very interesting, but I'm still critical of it because it feels like that is a thing, and it's a very big thing that serves the future more than it serves the now. And I feel like in assessing this one movie, I needed a better understanding of why that was necessary and more of what they were trying to say with adding that to her character.
Yeah, like I said, I think in the context of this film, we don't go deep enough. If you're gonna pull out that sort of circus trick, I suppose, in a sense, that's dismissive. I don't say circus
Yeah,
trick
yeah.
fans, but if you're gonna pull out that sort of device, you've got to have a really clear idea and intention. And I think I think there are things that people will, non-fan people will sit there and go, that was stupid. And
Mhm.
I think a lot of people will leave the theater on Friday night being, oh, I love that movie, I had a great time, but that guy with the Billy stuff is
Yeah,
really
yeah.
weird and stupid.
For what it's worth, I feel like it created the right feeling, especially towards the end. It's something about
Mm.
having Billy there in that house in that moment just felt right, and it felt like it enhanced the moment for me. And then I did kind of like the feeling of having a mixture of satisfaction that Tara and Sam were safe and sound and riding off in the ambulance together, but also like this tinge of the unknown in
Mm.
terms of what Sam is capable of. I feel like that's a more interesting note to end on versus, Sam saved the day and they're going off
Right.
into the sunset and we're doing that again.
I really enjoyed that. I will say, can I just say one line I liked in this film a lot, and
Yes.
it'll transition us into our next person if we're ready to move
Oh
along.
no.
Was when they go to the house and he's like, "Go away," and she's like, "I'm Billy Loomis's daughter," and he's like, That's even a better reason for
Yeah,
you to go
really.
away."
Dewey had a lot of good lines in this movie.
Mm, mm,
The I
mm.
think I think my favorite Dewey line in this is when Wes explains why he's a suspect and he goes, "Maybe you're the killer, 'cause that cut deep." Oh my god. Joel,
Ah,
Joel, they did it. They did it.
we discussed the possibility, right? And we said they wouldn't. We said we couldn't see how it would
I s
happen.
I said it. I said it when they released the first trailer. That was like one of my only predictions that actually came true, is that Gale's reaction was to finding out Dewey was dead.
Right. Well, maybe it was. I remember we had a discussion where we talked about whether the legacy characters were
Yeah,
safe.
we did.
And you were definitely on it in the trailer, but I think pre-trailer we discussed it and we thought, how does the film carry forward with that amount of grief coloring the tone? Which is why I felt like they did such an effective job of give it its moment, have the beautiful conversation between Sidney and Gale, and then
Mhm.
still move on. But I'm getting ahead of myself.
I'm just so sad about it. I honestly feel like having a cat named after that character made it hurt even more and made me even more sensitive. But I
How's
can't
Dewey
I
doing?
Dewey's very, very, very good.
Okay,
He's
good.
living like a Living like a damn king, that cat.
Yeah.
I keep wondering, or I was wondering, I've basically settled on an answer to this. What was his death necessary? Did it need to happen? And they flat out say it in the movie in terms of, in order to up the stakes, like the legacy characters can't all live. And I knew that that was the case. So I do think they ticked that box successfully. But in terms of Dewey's character arc, I don't think there was anywhere else for him to go. His like ultimately, like the goofiest character from the original ultimately had one of the most tragic stories of all of them. I mean,
Right.
he was meant to be in Woodsboro. He couldn't hack it with Gale in the big city, had to go back, gets his sheriff badge stripped from him, and he's at like the lowest possible low. And I think the only way for him to go out in a way where he's honored is doing exactly what he did, where he felt the urgency to push the kids out into the elevator, for him to step up and him to put an end to it. It's
It
just
was,
bulletproof vest.
for me, it was perfect. Like, I mean, devastating. Also, just to put another pin on this, I think this sequence is the other sequence in the film that I think is just
Yes.
like all-time franchise level high. Because genuinely terrifying suspense with the sort of dilemma that
Mhm.
Ghostface does, the sort of Joker dilemma, I'll call it, and just really well executed. And we don't see Ghostface walk slowly, really. So that was kind of an interesting little twist. But everything you said about where Dewey ends up in this film from the beginning to this point is almost, I felt it was just the perfect send off for him and the perfect end to his arc. This good, and Gale says it at the end, where she wants to write a book about this good guy, basically, who does good in the world and does it for his community. He's so it's
Mhm.
basically, there's two aspects of real, well, there's many aspects of Drew, but there's this like love and devotion to Woodsboro, and then there's this, I mean, he's got his demons, but then there's this other thing about doing the right thing and being brave and being the person you least suspect to be brave, but who is just the bravest and does the
Yeah.
right thing. And I think they also couldn't have him survive without it being ridiculous at this point, I think, if that sort of attack. So, and I think it worked. And I think that the fact that it, I mean, again, cruel. This movie is quite cruel, but
Yes.
it's the Gale phone call.
I know.
I was like, oh, no, you didn't.
And it like literally everything about that moment is attached to Gale, because the conversation that they had before
Mm,
where she says, like, "You're you're everything but a coward," I think.
mm,
Everything but a cat. You're many things, but you're not a coward, I think
yes.
is what she says. And that's the type of sentiment that I think would encourage him to do what he did. But him dying the way he did also, I think, serves Gail quite well, because she's clearly, even though she's got her big talk show, she's not in like the best situation ever. And you know she's got some shitty things she did to make up for, and I don't think she could ever make up for those things and change her ways unless something like this happened. So I don't know what the future of Sidney and Gale is going to be in this franchise, but if they do return, I would be curious to see how Gale grew from this.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, we can start talking about the legacy, I guess, in general.
Yeah,
But I think Courtney Cox is really great in this film.
she is.
And I think there's that sequence where she talks to Sidney afterwards, and it's just beautiful in the hospital.
Hmm.
I think her initial sequence with Dewey is an example, perhaps, of what happens when you're a more experienced actor. I feel like Gale is given probably a lot of lifting to do in that scene as well, in the same way
Hmm.
that Barrera is given like a word dump. And also those two characters have so much history that it plays
Yeah.
out a little more for us. But it's really emotionally affecting. Obviously, those two actors have
Yes.
connection that screams, that just sort of electrifies the screen. And yeah, I felt like, and I think it was really interesting to see that Gale had to be somewhat deflated in the second half of this movie,
Hmm.
but still managed to find steel in her connection with Sidney as they moved forward. And I'm not sure that we've seen sparks of that throughout. I think we saw it in the hospital scene at the end of Scream 4,
Hmm.
those two sort of fiercely working together. I think we saw it in elements of like on stage in Scream
Yeah.
2 towards the end, but this felt like the Sidney Gale team up
Yes.
that we needed. And when they're in that kitchen at the end,
Yeah.
just like, and
And
that sort of like tired doggedness of like, oh, we've been here, done this before, and
mhm.
sort of like dismissing the kids, like who were trying to kill them, but just also like the like, don't fuck with us kind of thing.
And
It all worked. It
the
was
story
gravy.
beats earn it. It
Yeah.
like for Gale, it's Dewey's death that makes it realistic that she is going to step up and put her life on the line in order to put an end to this and figure out who the killer is and confront, because again, these movies you run in the other direction. The two of them don't, and it needs to make sense that they don't. So for
Yeah.
Gale, I think the Dewey motivation works. And we also do find out that Sydney's a mother, and I think it makes all the sense in the world that Sidney will not be able to sleep at night knowing that Ghostface killers are running around out there because she has kids. So it made all the
I
sense in the world to me that she went
one
and set
single
that
line of
axe
dialogue
fire.
does all the work. For others have to do speeches, and she's just like,
I
I
know.
have 2 children. I won't sleep at night until he's dead in the ground.
It
I'm coming.
it works. Like,
Yeah.
yes, that is all you need to say, and I believe you.
Do you know what I love? And I'm sorry if I'm talking to I'm overtaking the conversation about Sydney
Sure.
and where she is now. Is that like I appreciate what Halloween has done with Laurie.
Lori.
Like I get it, that she's damaged and it's all about trauma. And I don't know if you've read the Final Girl support group, but definitely deals with the trauma and the sort
Mhm.
of like that sort of shutting yourself off from the rest of the world and going into protection mode. What I love about where Sydney is, and I think she was pretty here in Scream 4 as well, although she was a bit more sort of reluctant, I think, to join the fray there, even though she was marketing herself as a survivor, is that she's just kind of like, she's traumatized, but she's also like out there living her life. And it's almost, not that this is a pesky thing that's happening, but she's like, I'm going to go sort this shit out so I can get back to living my life kind of
Yeah.
thing. And
Well,
I kind of,
she only steps into the situation when she hears about Dewey.
that's true. Yeah. Yeah.
She's got no intention of taking part in this until she has to.
Yeah. And I just, yeah, 100%. And I don't know. There's something about where she is that she's found a healthy way of living
Yes.
that I found refreshing in this sort of era of examining the impacts and all that kind of stuff, which realistic or not, there's something about Sydney that I quite enjoyed in that aspect.
And she's off living her life with Mark. With Mark.
Who's Mark? No.
Don't say it to me again.
With
Joel,
Mark, we
I
could have
need
had a glimpse of Mark. We got a glimpse of Helen Matazzaro. Come on.
at the time of this recording, I have not shown Joel that interview. I feel like everyone out there will have seen it at this point. Listen, I understand that the makers of these movies don't necessarily harp on every detail that we do, but my heart, it sank. Who's Mark?
Mark is your husband. Mark Kincaid, Patrick Dempsey, Scream 3, getting a name check, if not a cameo in this film.
I'll take it.
Yeah.
I'm glad he was name checked. So it was, I mean, in addition to Stu and Randy, it was him, and you saw Tatum's ashes, I assume, in
Yes.
Stu's trailer. I'm trying to think if there was anything else. There's probably something that I missed. I feel like there's a million things floating around this movie.
Things that didn't happen, Kirby. I think some people had a feeling because
I know.
Kirby, damn it, she survived, or
Yeah.
she could have survived. I mean, given what certain people in this film survived, Kirby should be out there, like, should have been doing
I
gymnastics the next day.
know.
Sydney, I'm excited.
I'm
I
excited too.
also love that they gave us like badass Gale and Sydney lines at a clip
Yeah,
in that
a lot of them.
last reel, just like applause lines every moment.
There's a lot of good music cues in this movie. I'm just picturing the moment where Sydney first walks into Stu's house. There's a good one there. There's good use of Dewey's theme in this, but I think another one of my favorite sequences that I guess doesn't count as a death scene because she gets back up is one you already brought up, is seeing Gale and Sidney work together to put an end to Amber. I mean,
Mm,
that is like a very well choreographed fight scene there. And
mm.
did we I think one of us predicted that that was Amber on fire.
Oh yeah, I think we had the whole Amber situation sorted from day dot, to be honest.
Maybe, maybe.
I was like, she's definitely the killer. She's definitely faking the battle. She's going to die with getting fire.
Her also, like, Mikey's performance in that particular scene was just, like, fucking fire. She was
Mm,
with, like, the flip-flopping and then getting super nasty again. I thought she
yeah,
owned that.
yeah, no, incredible stuff. And I loved Gale.
Fucking
I was a
fire. I
little
didn't even mean to
concerned.
do that.
You did well.
I should have
She
should
was
have pretended
firing
it
on
was
all cylinders.
intentional.
Um, yeah, she lit up the screen. No, but I think I was concerned at a certain point when it was like when Gale gets shot. I was like, oh, come on, Courtney hasn't gotten to do anything in this film. I was like, she's just. But I love that she came back and she got her moments, and it was a lovely homage to what happens in Scream, the original.
Yes.
It was like all of that kind of stuff. But I don't know. This film. We're going to talk about fan service, right? But I'm like,
Yeah.
all that fan service stuff that we can talk about the specifics and Easter eggs, but I'm like, this film just delivers fan service in its dialogue. Like there is that final string of just like them saying awesome shit.
Yeah.
It's what I live for.
Two thoughts. Well, I'll get to the fan service in a second, but like literally every single character in this movie does not make it out unscathed. Like whether they die or whether they get shot or stabbed, literally everybody.
Well, yeah, Sydney's got like a little. I think she's got like a little target somewhere
Got
that she
stabbed
wears
in the
throughout these
stomach.
films. Doesn't she get stabbed for something like in every movie at some point?
I don't know. Amber stabs her here, and just like literally everybody is like fighting to even
Yeah.
stand by the end. I was just couldn't believe that. Fan service. This is this is my favorite film franchise. So I guess, some people might say I'm biased, but like this is my type of fan service because a lot of the things that we've brought up that are callbacks to the previous installments feel very natural to me.
Hmm.
It's like the idea of having Tatum's ashes in his trailer. Like, yes, I was like, look at that when I saw it, but it makes all the sense in the world to me. It makes sense to me that Sidney would rekindle her relationship with Mark. It like all of this just feels like it belongs in this world, and that is all I can ask for when it comes to callbacks to previous films.
100%. I think the fact that this film series has a continued narrative and real characters and all that kind of stuff lends itself to natural seeming quote unquote fan service that is actually just story happening. And so, I mean, okay, there are moments. We spoke about the couch sequence. I felt that was really well done. Lovely bit of fan service. I was super excited, and I think everyone in the theater who is familiar with these films will be super excited to see Heather Matarazzo back
Yes.
as the mother to the Meeks children. Now her first name's slipped my mind. I can't believe what's Randy's sister's first name?
Oh my God! Now that you said that, it's slipping my mind too. I know her name.
Martha? No,
Martha
is it
Meeks.
Martha?
Martha Meeks.
Martha
Martha
Meeks.
Meeks.
Okay, Martha Meeks. We didn't see her husband, but I just loved. I loved that little drop in. So great to
Yeah.
see Heather Matarazzo on screen again. I'm trying to think of what the other great little fans. I mean, the whole opening sequence is obviously a sort of.
Well, yeah. Like even things like making sure you put Red Right Hand in the movie, that felt
Yes.
very effective to me. I really like that. I mean, we talked about like other forms of nods, like Richie getting slashed on the arm, like Derek, things like
Mm-hmm.
that. I don't know. I thought it was all really well done. And this is I guess a big form of fan service in a way, but I was very nervous with how they were going to incorporate Stu's house. And I found that to be incredibly effective where it fuels Amber's motivation. I want a whole spinoff about Amber, and I want it to cover her family moving into the house, her first learning about Stu and how that changes her.
And her
I
first
found
kill.
I found that very interesting, but also like they really effectively recreate the atmosphere of the original third act set piece to the point that like I felt it. Like I felt like I was back there again, but also experiencing this new chain of events that was unfolding. It was like very, very well done.
110%. I agree with you there. I loved that use of the house. I think part of the impact was lost a little bit just from knowing, like, because I feel like for the audience who is perhaps less versed or hasn't, brushed up on their screen, there's supposed to be that reveal with that great shot,
Yeah.
where it's like, this is Stu's house, and that's kind of a big reveal in the film. But if you've seen these movies and you have eyes,
You know right away.
you're like, well, they're in the house, right? Or you've seen the trailers. So I felt like, I don't blame the film for that. That is a marketing thing, and that is a you and I being too obsessed thing. I do wonder whether it would have been a more interesting thing to have had the house be slightly more renovated, because that is realistically something that would have potentially happened in 25
That's
years,
fair.
right?
I have a question for you on this point, because a lot of people have asked me this, and I know where I stand on it. Do you think that someone can go into this movie and enjoy it and feel satisfied by it without having seen any of the original Scream movies?
Yeah, I do. I think the characters are drawn quickly and richly enough. I think the sequences themselves are so expertly done. You're not going to have the same emotional resonance when Dewey dies. You're not going to have the same
No.
emotional resonances when Judy Hicks shows up. You're going to be a little bit like, why do I care so much about Sidney and Gale? Because they are more sort of second half players, in a sense. And so if you don't really have that connection to them, you'll get the gist. I think it's a really effective roller coaster ride from the pure perspective of the Scooby-Doo style whodunit and the set pieces and the pacing. So I think you would have a good time. I think you would be sitting there asking questions. Yeah, but if you went to see a movie called Scream 5, or not called Scream 5, but that is the fifth movie in a franchise, you're probably going and expecting to be asking some questions if you haven't seen 1 to 4. Where do you stand?
I'm in agreement with you. I think that there's a strong enough story that can stand on its own 2 feet in this movie, but I'm also really excited about the potential I think this movie has to pull in new fans, particularly because of the new ensemble. I think they're very instantly likable and will, create that attachment regardless of how much Scream you've watched in your life. But then once you are attached, I'm really excited about the idea of someone having a similar experience that I had when the original came out, in terms of this being a gateway movie, with you needing to understand the callbacks to the previous films, so seeking out the entire franchise, but then also emphasizing the value of seeing newer horror movies that they reference, like The Babadook and The Witch. I thought all of that commentary was very effective, and it excites me that the way that Scream pointed me towards Halloween, that this new movie can point someone else towards The Babadook.
Yeah, I did enjoy that. I thought that was very funny. I liked Ghostface's response.
Yes.
Did they say that sounds boring or something?
Yeah, something like that. I like
was like, and I feel like for all the
conversation.
critics who are going to lay into Scream,
Yeah,
and
really.
I think it's currently, as we record this, 80% on Rotten Tomatoes, a good little website with 60 something reviews. And I suspect, I've had a little experience of that site and sort of watching how these things go. I think it'll go down.
I know.
I think it'll remain fresh. But I think, I love Ghostface's response. That sounds boring. Which I don't know if that's the exact line, but I enjoyed his sentiment. Not that I don't love those films.
This better not go rotten. I'll rage.
I don't work there anymore. I don't work there anymore.
I know. I won't hold you responsible.
Yes. So you talked about the exciting future of this franchise, right?
Yeah. I'm very curious to see what happens. If you had asked me for my sequel predictions, back in November, I would have told you, no doubt this movie is making lots of money and they're going to have to make a sequel no matter what. The current situation with the pandemic is, adding a little skepticism, but I still think this movie is going to do well enough. I think Paramount understands the value of this franchise. I think that they likely made this movie with the intention of making more. So I do think we're going to get more Scream movies with these new characters, which then the question becomes, what is next and who returns and how, and does it include both Sidney and Gale and also the new folks introduced in this movie? What town do they live in? Because I get the impression that Sam and Tara are like out of there. They're going somewhere else, but we can't lose.
Mm.
My mind is clearly going in a million different directions. I think there's a ton of possibilities here, and I just want every survivor to be involved.
Yes. I mean, I feel like in one way I left that screening thinking that's it for Sidney and Gale,
Yeah,
like as major
I might have had that
players.
feeling.
On the other hand, I did leave that screening thinking, was that enough of a send off for them? That was the thing. I loved it, but I'm like, I just felt like if they're gonna say goodbye to those characters, did I need a little more of a goodbye? I don't know. I think obviously they're setting up for sequels. Obviously the runway is there in a way that it actually wasn't at the end of Scream 4. I think like they Scream 4 subverted expectations by pretending to be the movie that Scream 5 is, and then just killing
Yeah.
off like it's cutting off its way forward. So I'm really excited for this, and I think, as you said, watch the money. I think the pandemic is going to have an impact. I still think the movie will perform well,
Mhm.
and I think, think about what just happened this last day. They just greenlit or announced Final Destination 8, or a
I'm
reboot of
so
Final Destination
excited.
series, right? With one of the writers of this film, I believe, involved.
Guy.
Guy, yeah. So, and what's producing from
John
the
Watts.
Spider-Man films. Yeah. So I think we're in a slasher
Yay.
renaissance. There's very much a vibe of this kind of film going around. I think look at what happened with Halloween. They announced, I think, almost after opening weekend, when that so
Mhm.
overperformed in 2018, that they were got two new projects on the boil. They definitely, historically, the Scream people map out their series and know where they're going, even if they decide to sever those plans. I expect they have a set of films ready to go into production, and that if we were to see a good performance this weekend, we might get the news relatively soon.
I hope so. I hope so. I'm really, really, really wanting more right now. When it comes to Sidney and Gale in particular, like I share your feeling. Like there was something about that felt like closure for them. And I liked that. I'm having, and maybe this comes from being an obsessive fan. I'm having a hard time picturing this franchise moving on without them, knowing that they're alive, even though they've gone through enough. They've learned their lesson, and like they deserve to have some happiness in life. And you know, part of me was thinking that I might be more open to letting them go if the next story more heavily focuses on the inner turmoil that Sam is feeling in regards to the fact that Billy is her
Mm.
father and she could be capable of doing terrible things like he did. But, at that point, like, maybe here's a bigger question. Is it a Scream movie without a traditional ghost face?
A traditional ghost face.
Like, as in a situation where someone puts on the mask and it's a whodunit and you gotta figure out, who the killer is,
Mm.
versus, like, a movie more heavily focused on maybe asking the question of whether or not Sam is a hero or a villain?
So I think what you're saying is you want to see something like Stab 7. That will anger the fans so
Stab
much
stab 8.
that
Stab 8.
8 is going to anger the fans so much that they're going to
They circle
that
back
they may do
around.
that, and then they're going to totally retcon it and be like, "Here's Scream 2." Like,
It's like in this situation, we do need a like, why would Ghostface reappear?
right. I do think it's going to be more. I mean, I actually think they've built in, like, I think they can move forward with the seemingly ridiculous idea that every 2 years someone else puts
Yeah,
on the
yeah.
ghost face mask and does it, because I think they've established a world in which it's done. They've established it's almost like a cultural thing that this happens. And I think with this new set of look, my prediction is they will move forward with a similar style of film in maybe a different location, still with ties to Woodsboro, that will center on Sam and Tara, and that may have elements of that darker thing, but I don't think I think it's still going to be a ghost face killer running around.
And then Chad and
Um,
Mindy come to visit wherever they are?
oh yeah, I think they're all going to be in it, all the survivors. And I think what they've done is they've essentially moved the chips for Nev and Courtney to no longer have to be a part of the action, but to potentially be the sort of, we go to you for a scene for advice or something. They hover on the exteriors. I don't foresee them coming to play and save the day in the same way that they did here. I think this was the send-off of them as a central pillar, as opposed to sort of shepherding a little bit forward and being the sort of go-to for advice.
I'm going to go ahead and say you're right on the money with that.
Though, I mean, I think a final girls situation with like Sam and Sidney, like as the centerpieces together would be really interesting. But yeah, I think that's the way forward. I mean, I would love, as you say, like I think I would love to see a more experimental take on this. But then I don't know if I would. So
no, it doesn't. It feels weird because after seeing this new movie, everything I say feels like it's something that was, criticized in the film.
I know. I'm like,
am I being too attached to the thing that I love? Should I be more open-minded about this? But they also say in the movie that, a stab movie, or in our case, a Scream movie, is a Scream movie, and it follows a certain formula. And I don't think you can rock that formula too much.
Right. Look, how many books did Agatha Christie write?
Excuse me?
I was like, how many books did Agatha Christie write? And they're all the same. Right?
Well,
so, but they're all pleasurable. They all hit those centers. And you probably wouldn't want to pick up an Agatha Christie book that read like a Jonathan Franzen.
I mean, it's true.
Wait, did we just end up being?
No, we're not. We're not the killers. We're not the killers.
We're not the killers. This is we did not kill these people.
No, we're not the killers. We're more like Mindy. Exactly. We have that understanding.
Yeah. You know what I did? Okay, I think this is a good way to end.
Okay. Because we can't talk for longer than the runtime of the movie. It's just it's a rule.
Also, sidebar, I sent you a note. Hello, everyone. I'm in the middle of my workday. Shh. And I've got a meeting in a few minutes. So to talk about things that are much less interesting.
Probably should have said earlier.
No, that's all right. See the private chat, Perri. I got 5 minutes, about 10 minutes ago. That's fine. But I will say, am I right in thinking that Ghostface doesn't actually say it's an honor in the film? Or he says it into a different context.
To a different character. I think it's said to Dewey.
Yeah.
And not Sidney. Okay.
Interesting. Well, it doesn't. I mean, it's an honor for Dewey. It's an honor for Sidney and Perri, as ever. It's an honor to share this time with you.
It is an honor. That is it. That is our spoiler review of Scream. This comment section is for you to discuss spoilers because, again, it's in the title of the video. I hope no one's here who hasn't seen the movie, but put your own thoughts in there. Put your predictions for future films in there. Tell us about your favorite scenes. Tell us if you have a different interpretation of anything that we discuss. We love hearing from you as well. Oh, God, Joel, we did it.
We did it. Oh, my God.
You are the best. I sincerely mean this when I say it to you. It is an honor.
Perri, it is an honor.